And so I'm glad that you're here today. I'm glad that you're here. You're supposed to be here. God wanted you here. God brought you here because he has something that he wants to say to you. So let's be open as God says that into our lives this morning. So for a few moments, we're going to look into a biblical story that frames for us one of the most powerful, high-voltage personalities that there actually is amongst us. There are people in the Bible, and there are people in this room that find yourself in the direct orbit of one of our most influential, powerful, and misunderstood personality types in the world. The Type 8, otherwise known as the Challenger. The Challenger. So the Bible has lots of these Type 8 Challenger types of people in it because they are powerful people, because they are high voltage people with this lead or get out of my way kind of personality. We see them in the Bible oftentimes as leadership figures. Makes sense, right? And most often, but not exclusively, that's the way we see the Type 8s in our world as well. Many, but not all of these folks can be our bosses, our supervisors, people who lead organizations, people who lead companies, people who lead small groups in churches, people who lead networks of people who lead all kinds of places, whether they be big places or small places. The challengers find themselves lots of times drifting towards being a leader of people. And because of that, there's lots of them found in the Bible, and there's lots of them found in this room, and lots of them found in lots of your places of influence. So the 8s in scriptures, these challengers in the Bible, I could have picked so many of them. They are everywhere, from the front cover to the back cover, everywhere in the middle. There's tons of these Type 8 challengers that I could have chosen to talk about today. And there's lots of them that there's been lots of these talks kind of done about. But I chose to pick one today that I couldn't find lots of talks done about. I chose to take on a biblical Type 8 challenger today that was a leader, a mobilizer, we're going to do this kind of person. And this person that we're going to look at is a strong, challenging woman. And her name is Deborah. She's a strong Type 8 challenger female whose name is Deborah. And so her story is found, if the church world is the world you're used to, it's found in the book of Judges. If the church world is not one you're used to, stick with me. I will take you where you need to go. The book of Judges is where this story of Deborah is found and told. And it's captured at a time in Israel's history before they had kings to lead them. So these judges were people that God assigned to lead the nation of Israel. And so the book of Judges kind of has a cycle to it. There's a pattern of behavior found in this book that basically summarizes and guides the whole book. So basically, the people of Israel would rebel through idolatry and disbelief. And then God would bring them into judgment, usually through like a foreign power that would enslave them for a period of time. Israel would cry out to God because of their oppression. Then God would raise up a judge or a deliverer or a leader to deliver them from this problem. God would then be faithful to deliver the people, and Israel would serve the Lord for a period, and then they'd fall back into their sin. They'd be enslaved. They'd cry out to God. God would raise up somebody else. He'd deliver them, and the cycle goes around and around and around. It is the book of Judges. And so it's here in this book that we're about to meet a high-powered, high-voltage, Type 8 challenger named Deborah. And she is one of these judges that God raises up to deliver Israel when they fall into sin. Someone enslaves them, and now this judge kind of steps in to bring them back to a place of liberation and freedom. So that's where kind of she comes in to this story. And so because of Israel's continued sin, they kept falling into this cycle. It's kind of who these people were. It's what they did. So because of this continued sin, God, in the passage we're going to look at today, has turned the nation of Israel over to a Canaanite king named Jabin. And Jabin was ruling the Israelites with a cruel, dictatorial hand. That's what dictators do. And this wasn't like an isolated incident or a short episode. This was cruel, and it lasted for quite some time. So let's turn, I'm going to walk you through Judges chapter 4. If you've got a Bible, you can follow, and if you don't, you can follow up here. So Judges 4 brings us into this story this way. It says, again, the Israelites, so again means it's not their first time, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord, now that Ehud was dead. So the Lord sold them into the hands of Jabin, the king of Canaan, because he had 900 chariots filled with iron and had cruelly oppressed the Israelites for 20 years. They cried to the Lord for help. So right from the beginning of Judges chapter 4, with many biblical stories you can see, it starts off with what? A problem. There is a problem here. What is the problem? The problem is these Israelites have fallen into sin again. Now they've been enslaved by this Canaanite king named Jabin, and it wasn't a short-term peace. He cruelly oppressed them for 20 years. So this was an incident that was kind of not a short, isolated one. It was one that was kind of continuing through their history and needed to be dealt with. So there's a problem, and this problem needs to obviously be solved. So who better to solve it? Who better to solve a big, big problem than a strong type 8 challenger who loves to push back, who loves to take on challenging situations, who loves to take on the powerful? We're going to meet that person right now, and her name is Deborah. So Judges 4 continues. Now Deborah, a prophet, the wife of Lapidoth, was leading Israel at that time. She had court under the palm of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim, and the Israelites went up to her to have their disputes decided. So Deborah, this 8 challenger, right from the beginning of this story, where is she? She's in a leadership position. What is her role? Her role is to decide between conflict between people. It's what she does. It's who she is. It's a part of her story. And now we see in the bigger picture of the massive conflict that Israel is now involved in, God is going to use her and inject her into this story. And right from the beginning of this problem with the people of Israel, we are going to see one of the core characteristics of an 8 challenger. And one of the core characteristics of an 8 challenger seen in this passage of Scripture is that the challenger will fight relentlessly for justice. It is who these people are. If you go through the Bible and you track these people, you will find that every time they're involved in a story, they are relentlessly pursuing God's justice for something that is broken. So here, Deborah, this type 8 challenger, she is a person in her role as one of the judges of Israel. She wants to see justice done. It's who she is. She hears these court cases between the people of Israel, sorting stuff through. It's what she does daily. It's her job. And now we're going to see, on a bigger scale, she is not going to stop until she sees justice done. It's who she is. When it comes to justice, and Deborah and these type 8 challengers that may be you and maybe people in your orbit, when it comes to justice, justice in their minds needs to get done. And if it's not getting done, get out of the way, because they are going to find a way to make the justice happen. The reason that God has her in this story is because she has a deep desire. She's got this fire of indignation that's been lit inside of her when she senses there's a wrong that needs to be made right. It's who she is. She's an 8 challenger. And so if you've got a person like this in your life, an 8 challenger in your life, or that's who you are, you will quickly sense that the 8 has this innate need. It's just they've got to. They've got to fix the thing that's broken. And if it requires going up against power to make the thing happen, even better. Get out of my way. I am going to do this. It's who they are. It's that thing that God's put in them. And they will easily take the lead to make stuff happen. They will make the first move in order to put things in place or to propel something forward or to get things done. And we're going to see that in Deborah in a few moments. And this drive, this intensity, comes from a core feeling that lots of 8s have it's a core emotion of anger. And not anger in a sense where it lashes out at people and beats people down. It's just this anger that lots of times comes out of this challenger, that they're just angry that that thing is broken and no one's going to fix it. They're angry at the fact that that person or that group of people are mistreated and no one's going to do anything. They actually use their anger in a positive way when many of us don't. So you can thank the challengers for that. Because lots of us get angry, and what do we do with our anger? We sin. We just hold it and we get frustrated and we mull it over and we do all this stuff, but we don't do anything. We just complain about it. We complain to everyone. We complain to people in the church, we complain to the pastor, we complain to our family, we complain everywhere, but we don't do anything. The challenger does something with their anger. They flesh it out and fix stuff. If they see something that's not right, and there's this righteous anger lit in them about it, they will actually step out and fix it. Thank God for them, because they are unique amongst us, that they are the people that will do that. Thank God for them, because without them in the world, there'd be a lot more injustice than there currently is. There'd be a lot more systems that are broken than there currently are, and there'd be a lot more broken people. So Deborah's about to step in here, and she's about to take this unjust situation, and she's going to take it head on. Here's a broken people, a broken nation. They're oppressed 2 decades, 20 years in, and she's not going to have it. She's going to have none of it. She's going to step in, and she is going to do what's right, because that's what eights do. They will fight relentlessly for justice. And so as we kind of process this, because as Christians we believe that we're all made in the image of God, and we all display, we all reflect, we all show off aspects of God's character, it's clear that one of the aspects of the character of God that the challenger kind of shows off is they clearly embody glimpses of the power of God. It's clearly who they are. They are creating people. They will create solutions where there's currently big problems. They've just got this powerful way about them. Deborah shows us that, and we'll see it in a few moments. These eights, they're not like, if you know any of these people, they're not lukewarm on anything. They're either all into something or they're all out of something. They're not kind of ambivalent, lukewarm. They're not 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Lots of the reading I've been doing, the phrase that keeps coming up, these people, these eights, they're so powerful, they don't come with dimmer switches. You can't kind of dim them down a little bit and hope that they come. No. They're on, full on, or they're off, full off. It's who they are. They are powerhouses. They're get it done, lead or get out of my way kind of people. And thank God for that. But if you have some of those people in your life, and you're not an eight yourself, there are times you can probably feel a little bit like you just got steamrolled. Diplomacy is not always their strong suit, but their raw power to make things happen continually comes out. And when they're in that healthy place, this is an attribute of God in them that you should thank God for. When they're in a healthy spot, these eight challengers who just want to take something wrong and make it right, that is an attribute of the power of God that you ought to be thankful that's in their life when they're healthy. So let's celebrate that when you see that in them. But the God image in them will also bring them to lead and influence other people, which is what we're going to see now in a moment through Deborah. To lead and influence other people to make a move for justice too. So they just don't feel I'm going to do this by myself. But everyone around here we're all in this together and we're all going to do it. And sometimes the eight, they're very protective over people that they deem to be vulnerable. And sometimes they're overly, aggressively protective over people that they seem to be vulnerable. So without the eights in the world, many of the movements around the movement of the gospel, many of the movements around social justice in the history of the world would not have taken place because they moved it. They made it happen. They got that thing going. And as I kind of think about in culture, as I watch the news and listen to stuff and try to be a student of culture a little bit, a famous, powerful eight in the news these days, and this is not my statement on any kind of politics because I don't have any beliefs on any kind of politics, but one of the things I see in the news today, one of the people I see in the news today who's probably a type 8 challenger is present in the U.S. presidential cycle right now, and the guy's name is Bernie Sanders. Because every time he speaks, what's it about? It's about health care for everyone, justice for all, down with the millionaires and the billionaires. That's kind of the speak. It's hard to say that sometimes when you're a millionaire, but still, that's the piece, right? That's the lingo, that's the agenda, that's the platform. And so to see that in culture, in leadership, is important. It helps us to understand where these people are coming from. They're often very powerful people who can best be characterized by a statement from General George Patton, who basically says, lead me Follow me or get out of the way. So these people don't have to be the leader, but they need to know if the leader above them is leading, they had to be a strong leader. They got to be going somewhere. They're not going to follow a weak leader. They don't have to take charge, but they want to be leading. They want to be following someone who's definitely going somewhere. Lead me, follow me, or just get out of the way. And the thing about these people is that they're always happy to lead the way, most times. Eights will see a mountain like we looked at, and we're going back to in a moment. Eights will see a mountain, an obstacle, a problem, and they will say, there will be no thought. They don't need to pray about it. They'll just look at that mountain and say, we are going to take that mountain. It's just what we're going to do. And they will know what to do. At least they will think they know what to do. And not necessarily because they've thought it through, but because they land in this gut triad that I talked about last week. They process the world through their instincts and through what their gut tells them is the right thing to do. And so because of that, they will just say, this is the right thing to do. Let's just go do it. And let's do it now. Let's do it. Yesterday was probably the best time to do this. And to borrow a phrase from an African friend of mine who's a leader in the church that he used recently when he was visiting to Canada, he said their posture is kind of not like ready, aim, fire, but it's like fire, ready, aim. It's what the 8 challenger will do. They won't oftentimes process and do all the discernment pieces first. They will lean into what their gut says, and sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes, when the 8 is not in a healthy place, they won't consult with other people. They're just like, this is what my gut says to do. This is the right thing to do. This is not right. We're going to fix it, and I'm on it. Where's the rest of you? That's kind of how they lean. It's kind of how they go, right? And so sometimes without kind of leaning on other people, they will just determine their gut tells them this is the right thing to do, and they're going to do it. And the amazing thing about this, before we get right back to our passage here, is because of this, 8s know what they've got to do, and many times, because of their attitude to take charge and get it done, which we thank God for, but lots of times they also believe that not only do they know what they've got to do, but they know what you got to do too. They know what we all need to do, oftentimes before we even sense what it is we need to do, or what it is you sense you may need to do. So let me get back to the story so you can see this for yourself, so you know I'm not making this up. Deborah sent for Barak, son of Abinoam, from Kadesh in Naphtali, and said to him, the Lord, the God of Israel, commands you, that's pretty strong, go, take with you 10,000 men, and lead them up to Mount Tabor. I will lead Sisera, the commander of Jabin's army, with his chariots and his troops to the Kishon River, and give him into your hands. So one of the things we see here, there's a couple of strong words in the passage from this type 8 challenger, which are indicative of that personality type. God commands you to do this, and now that he's commanded you, what should you do? Go. There's no ambivalence around this. There's no kind of in-betweens. And so one of the things that we can see here is that when it comes to these wonderful 8 challengers amongst us, they're going to communicate directly, and they're going to be assertive. It's who they are. And lots of us aren't comfortable with that. Lots of you are not comfortable with that. Lots of us don't know how to process it when an 8 challenger steps in and communicates this way. But it is one of the pieces that God has kind of given them, and we need to learn how to respond to it, and they need to learn how to channel it. It's interesting. So the 8 challenger, Deborah, she knows that King Jabin needs to be dethroned, and she knows that this guy Barak is the one that needs to do it. And I love how she leans into this. She is a type 8 challenger for sure. She doesn't lean into Barak and say, let's have a discernment conversation with what I think the Lord might be leading you into. And she doesn't have a conversation with him like, I think this is something that maybe you should pray about. No, she doesn't have that conversation with him. She steps into him, and it's decisive. It's firm. There's no wiggle room. Hey, Jabin, the Lord has commanded you, and now you just need to go. And now what happens? Here comes the plan. She's got the plan. Take 10,000 people and do this piece. Go here and lead them to Mount Tabor. And then I'm going to do this piece. And I will lead Sisera towards the commander of Jabin's army. And by the time this is all said and done, it's going to be great. And God's going to give him into our hands. Good job. Game over. That's how an 8 oftentimes processes stuff. 8s will sometimes communicate this way, and we don't know what to do with that. And I'm sure that sometimes people like Barak are sitting there, and they were just like, well, you know something, I just had my day mapped out, and I was just planning on going for coffee. And now all of a sudden, we're involved in this big story, and there's a big thing, and now like I'm involved, and these are the plans, and I was just planning on hanging out at Starbucks today. And now all of a sudden we're taking on a massive social justice issue in the city. And how did this happen? 8s will communicate sometimes like that. I don't know if you've ever had conversations with 8s like that, but I have. And I'm sure many of you have too. And so there are times when, because of their supercharged personality that just needs to fix this piece, they will communicate sometimes what is the plan for their own lives, and they'll communicate what the plan for your life is too. And if you've not had that conversation, I'm sure the day will come, if there's an 8 in your orbit, that you will have that conversation. Sometimes you'll walk in the room to talk to a friend of yours or someone who's in your orbit who's a type 8 challenger, and you just wanted to talk about your feelings. You just wanted to walk in to talk about some of the stuff that was going on in your life and some of the things you were thinking about. And all of a sudden, the 8 just takes control, and the next thing you know, the next 2 years of your life are mapped out, and you didn't even know what happened. It happens. Deborah is one of those people, and I'm sure Jabin was probably sitting back and thinking, what just happened here? The 8's desire to get stuff done is a gift from God. The 8's desire to make things happen and to move that ball down the field is a total gift from God and totally represents the character of God. So be thankful to God for it. But a blind spot that these people sometimes have. A blind spot that Deborah probably had here. That can happen sometimes for an 8 in this area. Sometimes the 8s can come off a little intimidating. Sometimes they can kind of come off a little aggressive. And those of us that aren't 8s, we don't know what to do with that. We're not used to those high-powered, supercharged, you go do this conversations and do it yesterday. That's not kind of how we process stuff. And so sometimes because of it, when we have those conversations with people, we come off intimidating. There's some of you who are type 8 challengers and you don't know why you can't make that connection with your neighbor. Sometimes it's simply because you're just dialed on completely all the time and your neighbor's not. And there's sometimes when you may feel to other people like you're a little bit intimidating. It happens. And there are times when oftentimes those who are in the orbit of an 8 may feel like, what just happened? Like, was I in that conversation? I'm going where? With whom? To fight what? It happens. And so let's see how this keeps playing out so you know I'm going to ground this in Scripture here. So this is the thing, and directive and assertive. And then Barak says to her, okay, I can play ball on this. Not the plan, but I can do it. But if you go with me, I'm going to go. But if you don't go, count me out. I don't want to be involved. I don't want to be in on this. You don't need to be a Hebrew scholar to learn that there's some uncertainty in this passage on his part. There are some things being processed here on his part. He's not totally confident on this. He's not totally sold. He's not totally sure that this plan is the plan. There is some fear. He's probably very shell-shocked after that conversation. Probably pretty caught off guard after that conversation. That was not his plan. That was not in his agenda for today. And now we're about to see one of the ways a challenger might come across when they're not operating in their most optimal place of health. So this is what we see as we continue down through Judges chapter 4. So Deborah responds to this. And she says, okay, certainly I'll go with you. But because of the course that you're now choosing to take, the honor of what's going to happen today is not going to be yours. God's going to deliver Sisera into the hands of a woman instead. Dude, she's no nonsense. Like, she doesn't kind of mince words. She's not kind of like, well, let's think this over a little bit. Let's discern, let's pray, let's process, let's talk to the multitude of counselors where there's wisdom. She doesn't say any of that stuff to this guy. She's like, all right, if that's what you want to do, then I guess that's what we're going to do. She wanted the job done badly enough that she would accompany him, even though that wasn't her plan. It's not what she wanted to do. But she wanted the justice done so badly that she's like, all right, if this is what I need to do to make this happen, if I need to come and hold your hand on this, then I'll do it. But it's not what the plan was. It's not what you're supposed to do. And almost implying, what does it imply? In you there is what? Weakness. There's weakness. You're weak. This is what you're supposed to do, just go do it. And sometimes that can kind of come across when an 8 is not processing in a totally healthy spot. And so she let him know that she wasn't totally happy about it. She let him know directly and forcefully that this is your battle to fight, really. And if you need me to help, I'll go. I'll hold your hand. But hey, this is not the way it's supposed to go. This is an interesting passage of Scripture if you think about the relationship between two people. Because the challenger, if you're one, or if you're in the orbit of one, the challenger lots of times and sometimes can experience some relational blindness. There can be some blindness in relationships with 8 sometimes, especially if they're floating in a more of an unhealthy way. They've not reflected well on where they're at. Because of the gift of God that God has given the 8s, that this thing has to be done and it has to be done yesterday. Because they see the justice piece and they have to move towards it, lots of times there can be some relational blindness between them and people that they want on that team. It happens. 8s can focus so much on that because they're driven and they're assertive and they want the job done, the task accomplished, but in the midst of that sometimes they can lose traction on what's going on in the relationships with people. Sometimes the tender side of dealing with people in their orbit doesn't come out the way that they can. And showing the initial care for others isn't really their strong initial posture. It's let's get this thing done. Now don't misunderstand me. The beautiful thing about the 8s, another beautiful thing about them is not only do they display God's power, but we're going to make this happen, this wrong is going to be made right, they also care deeply for people. Their heart is usually very, very soft. But you don't see that a whole lot. Their heart is very soft. They care. Listen to this. If they didn't care for people, why would they drive for justice? If they didn't care about what happened to you, why would they make sure that the systems that are breaking you are fixed? If they didn't care about those around them, why would they just drive to no end to make sure that this people has justice done? Why? Because they love people. And if you're in the orbit of an 8, and sometimes you kind of feel like you're on the receiving end, listen, it's not because they don't love you. There's a very solid chance that they do love you very, very deeply. But there's this relational blindness that sometimes comes, not always, but sometimes. Just because we need to make sure this happens, and it should have been done yesterday. Deborah didn't say to Barak, like, well, listen, I see and understand your apprehension with this, and I'd love to be your prayer support and your spiritual life coach on this, and we're going to walk this through together, our journey, heart to heart. No, it wasn't. It was like, all right, I'll go with you, but I'm not happy about it, and you're not going to get the honor that you would have got. All right, let's go do it. It's kind of there's relational blindness kind of there in some sense. And if you're in the orbit with an 8, sometimes you might feel like that. And if you are an 8, it's wise to be sure that you try your best to hear people. It's wise to be best that you try to hear people, especially when you got the plan and you got the plan for the rest of us and you just want to go. If you're an 8, it's good to understand that your personality is twice as big as you think. And you're twice as energetic as you think. And you're twice sometimes as intense as you think. And that's a gift from God. We're thankful for it. But you need to be careful with how we understand that. And how you communicate to those of us that maybe our personality is not wired that way. Because sometimes what feels like passion to an 8 oftentimes feels like intimidation to others of us. I know lots of people, man, they're some of the most passionate people in the world and in the kingdom to get stuff done. Boy, watch out. But there's times when they can come across like they're intimidating. Just because they really feel so strongly about this. And if that's where you are, that's just a blind alley for you that you need to be aware of, and sometimes you walk down it and you don't know it. If we read down through this passage just a few more verses, we see Deborah's 8-ness come out a little bit more. She says, then Deborah said to Barak, go. I love it. This is the day the Lord has given Sisera into your hands. Don't you see that the Lord has gone ahead of you? So even when Barak might have needed a little more hand-holding, a little more encouragement, a little more counsel, it doesn't quite happen this way. It is straight. The 8s are straight. Go. Don't you see? So it's this piece that the 8 kind of think, they see something that this other person doesn't see. You just need to go. You don't need to quite, just go. Don't you see what God is up to? Because of the great power of the 8, they can sometimes push a little too hard and be a little too aggressive with those around them. She just assumed that Barak saw what God was doing, and he didn't see it. He didn't see it. She saw it. Why? Because that's the way she's wired. That's her person. That's who she is. She's going for it. But he didn't see it. So what'd she say? Hey, just go. I can't believe you don't see clearly what God's doing. Hey, some of us don't see it. Some of us need more time. Some of us need to discern a little more. We're all on the same page. It's a beautiful thing. And again, this comes from the 8's great passion that we're so thankful for in the Christian community, in the church especially. And so one thing I want to kind of reassure the people who are here today who are listening, and this is not really where you are, but you're in the direct orbit. An 8 is someone that you love, and you're right there. I want you to understand this, that these people don't mean to hurt you or disrespect you. They love you very deeply. They just want to take that mountain. They just want to take that mountain. They just want to see this thing fixed. They want to see that person that's not getting justice get it. They want to see that broken thing put back in place properly. And sometimes when you don't know what to do in that situation, if that's the orbit that you find yourself in, don't be afraid to push back on the 8. Speak direct. Because if not, there will be times because of the directness and the aggression of the 8 that you will constantly be taking their plan for your life. Don't be afraid to say, hey, thank you for that, but I kind of feel this is what God's saying to me. And do that. Don't just sit back and open posture, take it, and not give any feedback at all. Don't do that. The 8s enjoy healthy debate and conversation. The 8s actually like that. They like it when you kind of challenge them on things and you kind of just don't receive what they say all the time, but you kind of push back a little bit. Do it. I've got 8s in my life, and I know that they love that. I need to do it more, actually. And so do that. But always remember that they love you. Always remember that they're very soft and they love you. And this is not meant to disrespect or hurt you. It's they love, they're passionate. They're passionate. So be careful about that 8, because eventually some 8s that I know, because of this piece, totally got to take that mountain, totally not going to really take the time to listen to those around me. Sometimes I know 8s who end up taking the mountain by themselves. They try to, because they've isolated themselves now from people. There are certain things, that drive every one of us. Every person in this room, every person in the Bible, every one of these 9 personality types that we're going to ground into in Scripture for the next few months, and even the 8s amongst themselves are very, very different. But a core need of many of these 8 challengers, why do they do those things? Why is it? One of the big pieces around that is being in control is a strong need for these folks. It's a big piece. It's a major driver behind why they do some of the things that they do. Controlling situations or people or trying to set the agenda, or in the workplace, in the family, in the church, in the networks of people. It happens. Why is that? There's this piece about needing to be in control. And the thought of not being in control is one that really doesn't sit super well with the 8, and I'm going to tell you why in a moment. But when an 8 is not in a healthy place, there's just this need to be in control and to be able to kind of know what's happening next and to be the person who sets the course. But the truth is today, if you're an 8 and you're here and this is what you kind of live with, there's nothing more exhausting than trying to control everything. There's nothing more exhausting than trying to control everybody, no matter how hard you try, because you won't be able to do it. Some of the 8s I know are some of the most super energized people I know, but they're also some of the most drained people I know. Because guess what? There's lots about this life that you can't control. There's lots that are going to happen that despite the great power that God has given the 8 to just fix broken stuff, there's some stuff they just can't fix. There's some stuff only God's going to be able to do. So for some of us with 8s close to us, we need to be cognizant of this because this core need is driven by a core fear. One of those core fears is being vulnerable. Having people see them for who they are. Because these 8s, these challengers, these strong leaders amongst us, they're oftentimes very tender on the inside. And lots of the reasons why we see their hard outer shell is because they're afraid of being vulnerable, because they're afraid of being hurt. And so rather than be hurt, I'm going to lead like this so I don't get hurt. I'm going to set the course, Duke's up, let's go, let's fix it, but I'm not going to stop and slow down long enough really to be vulnerable with people. 8s, I know lots of vulnerable 8s, but they're very healthy 8s. They've moved towards being vulnerable. They've worked at that. They're aware of it. And over time, they've worked at becoming more transparent with those around them. They will take a risk on somebody else leading, even when the 8 doesn't really think that person knows what they're doing. They will take a risk on them as they move towards this. So for some of us, with 8s close to us, be mindful that some of the ways that their power shows up sometimes just because they're deeply afraid of being vulnerable. So be gentle with them too. Be tender with them. Help them to discover some of the vulnerability that maybe they don't naturally connect with. And if that's something that you naturally connect with, try to help them find some of that. It's a healthy place for them to be. Because here's something that's very true about this life, and I'm sure that you know this, that living life with other people and being vulnerable with people and trusting people and allowing other people to take the lead even when you don't sense this is the best way forward is the truest way that you're going to experience the beauty of community and the truest way you're going to experience the beauty of the gospel. Let me say that again in case you missed it. One of the true things about this life is that living life with others and being vulnerable with others and trusting others and taking your guard down around others and allowing others to take the lead even when you don't think it's the best plan. That's one of the truest ways that you're going to experience the beauty of community and the beauty of the gospel. A belief that's captured and really rules the life of some 8s is that it's not okay to be weak and it's not okay to be vulnerable. And if you're going to let Jesus be the center and you're going to let God be the focus, then you can't be the center. And you can't be the focus. And you can't be in control. And in order for an 8 to be as healthy as they can be, they have to come to that realization. They have to. But there's no need to control all the things around them. There's no need. And the way that they will become closer to God, the way that they'll become closer to people in God's church, the way that they'll become closer to people in their neighborhood, is by taking the guard down and embracing and living this truth that was written by the Apostle Paul, who had some very strong 8 in him as well. He says this, "But God said to me, that my grace is sufficient for you." Why? Because God's power, which the 8 has lots of, but it's really made perfect in weakness. It's made perfect in weakness. Thank God for the 8s amongst us. I just want to lead with strength. I'm going to take the world apart and I'm going for it yesterday. Thank God for them. But learn to be vulnerable. Learn that the power of God is perfect when it's perfect. God's power is at perfect display in you when you're weak. It's not totally when you've got it all together, even though there's lots of times you will. Not totally when you feel that you know the next step for you and for all of us. But when you don't know what to do next, and you don't have a clue what just happened, and you don't know what the steps are for today or for tomorrow, that's when God's power is made perfect in you, 8. When you're weak, embrace it a bit more. Embrace it a bit more. The Apostle Paul says, and boy, if you don't think he was an 8, you need to read Scripture. Look at the stuff he took on. Look at the thing he moved forward. If it wasn't for him, we wouldn't have the gospel. He's a challenger. He pushed forward on this piece. Therefore, he says, I'll boast all the more gladly about what? My weakness. It's amazing. Why? So that the strength of God can rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in what? Weakness, in insult, in hardship, in persecutions. For when I am weak, then I'm strong. Thank God for the 8 challengers amongst us. Boy, do we love you. But God's strength is present in your weakness. And if you're listening to this today, as I kind of land this now, and you're an 8, this is kind of a big part of you, this is a big part of who you are. I want to take a moment just to, no filter, thank you for who you are. No filter, thank you for who you are. You are a gift to God's church. You're a gift to your family. You're a gift to society. Without you, the world will be a totally unjust place. Without you, people like Deborah would not step in and say, this nation, I won't stand for this anymore. We're going to fix this problem. Without people like you, there'd be so many important things in this world that would simply go by the wayside. They would not get done. Without people like you, 8s, there'd be so many of the rest of us that we would just sit in meeting mode for months trying to figure out, what are we going to do next? What's the next step in this plan? We would sit on the fence forever trying to make decisions on very, very important things. And without you today in our world, there'd be so many people that wouldn't even have the basic necessities of life today if it wasn't for the 8 that said, that is not right. We're going to fix it. If it wasn't for you 8s, there'd be so many people in the world today, many of us included, that would never have heard the gospel. So today, if it were not for our 8s, I dare to think about, and I dread to think about, the tons of victories that we would not have won. It fears me to think about the advances the world would have not taken, the steps that the church would not have taken, the steps that the gospel would not have taken. If the 8 challenger Paul stepped down when those amongst them said, hey, listen, this is not for the Gentiles. Don't bother with them. And Paul said, it's not right. And I'm going to take it. If you like it or not, Pharisees, Sadducees, this gospel is moving because it's the right thing to do. Thank you if that's where you are. For the kingdom, thank you if that's where you are. Because today, 8s, you show God's power amongst us in a way that's unique. In a way that we don't really see amongst the rest of us in that sense. And we love you for that, and we respect you for that. Just sometimes be aware of how that lands on the rest of us. Some of us who aren't quite as powerful as you are. This week, as I was kind of really like, this has been on my mind for a couple of months and just kind of trying to figure it out. And this week I was really just trying to land that plane, just trying to get it down. I was like, God, how can I pray for the 8s? How can I pray for these folks just to empower them and equip them, but also bring them into a place of awareness on some of these things? And I found this prayer. It's called the gospel that the 8s need to believe. And I love this. I do. It says I do not have to be strong and in control because Jesus is my strength and He is in control. When I was weak and helpless, He used His perfect power to come to my aid and to rescue me from my sin and my false self. He has proven trustworthy and that His love for me is unconditional. This means I'm free to be vulnerable with God, I'm free to be vulnerable with others, and boast all the more of my weaknesses without fear of being dominated or controlled. For I am controlled by the love of Christ. If that's not beautiful, then I don't know what is.